Alright, so we're back, of course, talk about some more Crisis Core Reunion. We have some pretty cool info for the game. It's a little bit older. This came out like December 23rd. We got the sales for the game on specific platforms for Japan only. But it's still pretty cool information considering that, according to this data, Reunion is potentially the biggest launch for a spin-off game for the franchise in the last like 8 or so years, since about 2014 or so. And it's actually like the third biggest launch for the franchise in the last decade. And this game having such a successful launch is obviously a big deal, but I think it's important for Square Enix to see what they should be trying to do when it comes to Final Fantasy VII in terms of spin-off games, because we obviously got to point to something like First Soldier. Now, First Soldier had a lot of issues, platform of choice being one of them, and it's not really comparable to something like fucking Crisis Core Reunion. Obviously, these are vastly different games. But the failure of First Soldier should show Square Enix that they can't just do anything they want to with Final Fantasy VII. Not everything is going to be a success. Now, obviously, Crisis Core itself is already an old, established game. It's been around for 15 plus years at this point. But the point is, if they want to do spin-off stuff for FF7, they should really be focusing on single player, at least for the most part. Ever Crisis has a lot of potential, but we have yet to see what that game really offers totally. And actually, before we even hop into the video, speaking of First Soldier, I think they could have done, or maybe still could do, something pretty cool with that concept, man. I think it would have been interesting if they would have done like a spin-off single-player game where you're this guy trying to join the beginning of Soldier, and you get to see like young President Shinra, young versions of all those different characters that might be around at that time, and see like the dark beginnings of Soldier and shit, like the early days of what like Hojo and all them were doing and stuff. Like, there could have been a cool thing there, but they went the route of Battle Royale, and that was the biggest issue too, besides it being mobile only. So this tweet from Game Data Library on December 23rd that says, retail launch of the Crisis Core FF7 Remake in Japan are the highest for a Final Fantasy spin-off since 2014's Final Fantasy Explorers on 3DS. Should be over 200k digital, which is the third biggest FF launch for the past 10 years, only behind 7 Remake in 15. So obviously that's great that Reunion's doing well, and we're only factoring in the physical sales of the game, right, in Japan on specific platforms. Once we start factoring in all the different platforms and digital sales, which digital sales would be like the PC market, which would be almost strictly like fucking digital, right? I know they sell physical versions of games these days, but I don't know what all comes out physically. And most people are on Steam, so it's like all digital, right? And if you factor in like digital, physical, and all platforms across the world, this is also only in Japan. Like, Reunion's probably doing very goddamn well. In fact, if you actually look at this list right here, right below Reunion is Stranger of Paradise, which is actually a very comparable game to Crisis Core, just because it's a prequel to the original Final Fantasy. Obviously, Crisis Core is a prequel to FF7. And they're on similar platforms here. Now, we're only looking at PS4 and PS5 for Stranger of Paradise, and obviously Reunion has that plus the Switch. And even if we were to remove the Switch sales for Reunion between PS4 and PS5, it's still more than doubled what Stranger of Paradise did. In fact, every platform here did better than what Stranger of Paradise did on both PS4 and PS5 combined. Which I find to be kind of crazy, because the community feedback for Stranger of Paradise was very, very high, right? I played the demo, wasn't the biggest fan of the game, but the community seemed to absolutely love Stranger of Paradise, and still do to this day. So I thought it was just doing like way better than what it seems to have done, at least in Japan. Maybe it's bigger in the West or something, I don't know. Now, some of the other comparisons on this list aren't technically fair, if that makes any sense, because like Final Fantasy Explorers is the only one in the last like 8 years or so that's beating Crisis Core Reunion, but Final Fantasy Explorers only launched on the 3DS, and that is it. Whereas Reunion obviously has a bunch of other platforms, so it's not really comparable, because like if you had like Explorers launching on 3DS, but also like the other platforms at the time, it'd probably decimate Crisis Core Reunion, judging by these sales here. And look at this list too, like something like Type 0 HD is a very comparable game to Crisis Core Reunion, right? The original Type 0 was a PSP exclusive game for several years, and was eventually brought to modern consoles. But on this list, we're only looking at PS4. But the PS4 sales for Type 0 HD are 91,000, like just under 100,000. That's insane, dude. That decimates what Crisis Core Reunion did on PS4 and PS5 and Switch, if we're looking at them individually. And actually, if we continue here with the Type 0 and Crisis Core comparisons, both those games launches on the PSP according to this chart. Type 0 actually did better, which is about only 30,000 units or so better, but that's still kind of crazy that it outsold Crisis Core, which is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII of all goddamn things. Shows you how popular Type 0 was, I guess. Or maybe even 13 as a whole, because it's a part of that whole universe. Or the Nova Crystallis thing, whatever. Anyways, continuing on with the video. So another reason why it's pretty exciting for Reunion to have such a successful launch is it might really kind of kick Square Enix in the ass to want to do something else with the rest of the compilation, right? Dirge of Cerberus is the obvious comparison here. It's the only one that you could really give that kind of Crisis Core Reunion treatment, because it's an actual console game that you could really pretty up. You have Before Crisis, which we all do want them to port and bring to modern platforms somehow, but it's also an old, very obscure mobile game, so I don't know how would you do Before Crisis on the goddamn PS5? Like, I don't know what you do there, but maybe they could put it on Switch, maybe mobile phones, maybe you could put it on modern consoles, but I just don't know how you do it exactly. It'd be kind of weird. But yeah, again, Dirge Cerberus is the obvious one here. If you give it the Reunion treatment, you touch up the graphics visually, because the CG cutscenes are fucking beautiful for this game. The in-world stuff, I know it's an old PS2 game. It still does look pretty fucking rough. So if you're touching it up visually and then like overhaul the combat and make the shooting a lot better, then I think it's a fantastic candidate for like a remake/remaster thing. Obviously, a Dirge of Cerberus remaster/remake won't happen for quite a while. They've already said that it can't even happen until probably the remake trilogy itself is done, because it technically spoils the story. Even if they might go in some sort of different directions with the remake trilogy, it's still going to follow the basic trajectory, at the very least, of the FF7 original story, right? And obviously, Dirge of Cerberus is a game that takes place after FF7. It takes place after Advent Children, in fact. So they can't really drop that before they finish doing the remake game. So it's not something we're going to see for quite some time. But eventually it might happen. And it definitely should happen. Anyways, that's more or less the video, my dudes. Not a whole lot to talk about, not a whole lot to break down here. The point of the video, the TLDR, Crisis Core Union is doing well. It's one of the biggest releases for the franchise as a whole in the last decade or so. Really only behind Remake and Final Fantasy 15, which those are obviously way bigger releases. Those are, Remake is essentially a numbered entry, right? It's a remake of a numbered entry, and obviously 15 is an actual numbered entry. So it's not a surprise that those would sell better. And we'd love to see that shit. I love seeing some respect put on my boy Zach Fair's name. And hopefully Square Enix at some point can show us the exact sales numbers from the physical and digital sales of this game. Because I would say for combining physical and digital across every single platform, it might break upwards of like 300,000 potentially, if not more than that. I don't know. Either way, my dudes, that's the video. Subscribe to you guys. Our new social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more. And nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.